If you were to peek over my shoulder on an active Photoshop day, you'd rarely see me do File Open. I prefer to use Adobe Bridge, and if you haven't heard of Bridge before, it's an application that installs with Photoshop. To launch Adobe Bridge, I'll choose File, Browse in Bridge from within Photoshop. Once Bridge launches, you could think of it as a replacement for your operating system. Often I teach hands-on classes where there are both Mac and Windows users in the same room, and if we're in Adobe Bridge, everything looks and feels identical. In fact, that's true of most Adobe programs, but it's a lot easier than navigating users to different spots in the open dialog from one platform to the next. But there's a lot more that Bridge can do. I'm going to maximize Bridge to fill my screen, and when I first log in, it takes me to my user folder, or Kelly. I tend to keep all of my class files on the desktop and store my personal files there as well. So I'm going to go into the lesson files folder, and you'll notice I'm navigating as if I were at my operating system. I just double-clicked. Now I'm going to go into the Lesson 2 folder, and you'll see some of the images that we're going to use as part of Lesson 2. So what's beautiful about Bridge is that it gives you much larger previews than you get when you choose File Open. If I were to slide this little preview size up and down, I can get even more detail or larger images for the photos that I'm looking at. And that's in the lower right corner. So looking at Bridge, they have lots of parts to the interface. Firstly, I can see actually where these images are stored, a full path. This is known as the path bar. Here are frequent spots that I may visit. My Pictures folder, which I haven't loaded anything on this new machine, my Documents folder, my Desktop, my User folder, or Computer where I could see different drives that are inserted. Or if you have servers that you work from, they would show up there. But I'm going to hit Desktop again and go back into Lesson Files and back into Lesson 2, and there's a few other portions of the window that I like to use. If I click once on an image, it does give me a preview, but since these photos are all nice and large, it would be helpful to have a larger preview than just this content area. So with Adobe applications, panels can be combined and moved. I like to drag the preview panel on top of filter and collections, and the same with metadata and keywords. I build one giant group of all the extra panels, and once I've done that, I can come over here to this dark gray area and drag to the right to get rid of that empty space that I no longer need. Now I've got 5 or 6 panels stacked right behind one another. Filter, collections, preview, metadata, and keywords. So here's where I was going with this. If I click on preview once, the taller I make it and the wider I make it, the more detail I can see. In fact, if I double click on favorites, it collapses and I get a much bigger image preview. This is really helpful if you have similar photos and you just want to get a difference between them without actually double clicking to open them in Photoshop. And if I click once in the preview window, there's a little loop tool that will let me read this German. Well, I can't read German. Will let me see that this is German and I can't read it. A shot taken in Austria. So if I move around, I can get a zoom in of the delicious fried chicken that they serve there. And I can use my wheel on my mouse or just my plus sign on my keyboard to zoom in or out. So I'm wheeling up and down right now, but simply hitting plus or minus zooms in and out. And I can close this loop window by clicking once anywhere and it will close. Or if I've zoomed into a particular area, let's go over here, I could just click once in the middle of the window. It also goes away. So when I'm finished, I'll double click on Favorites, and Favorites is frequently accessed locations, but I really, again, want to treat it like my operating system. I'll click on Folders, and I can see that I'm on my desktop, I'm in Lesson Files, and if I expand Photoshop Projects, there are 3 other folders inside. Austria Photos, and I can see all of those previewed, iPhone Images, and Text Files. And even though it doesn't preview the text files, I could double-click a text file, and it would open up, and I'll close it. So it links to programs that are not created by Adobe. Bridge will preview virtually any image format. It'll even play movies, and it will give you extra information about InDesign files, like what colors and fonts are used, and also Illustrator and PDF files. You could see previews into those. So point Bridge to some folders on your hard drive and see what it reveals about other Creative Cloud applications. The last thing I'll mention is the filter panel. Sometimes I'm looking for a particular image. I remember that I made an edit to it, so it's a Photoshop file. I can filter in this folder of 26 items to see just Photoshop documents, or just the JPEGs, or just the TIFFs. To finish up, I'm ready to work in Photoshop, so I tend to like to leave Preview up, and the image I want to open is Boy and Girl TIFF. If I double-click on the right side in the Content area, it opens in Photoshop. And the same would be true for another application. If I double-clicked an Illustrator file, it would launch and open Illustrator, or InDesign, or Acrobat, and so on. So I hope you enjoyed Bridge, which you launch through File, Browse in Bridge, and you'll find that I live there when working in Photoshop. It saves me a lot of time for navigation and also has quite a few automation features and image processing features built in.